What's up everyone, I'm Dave Mech and welcome to this new video showcasing another ginormous update for Digitakt. They added 3 new machines and a specific sample length. If you're not familiar with the machine concept, basically for each audio track we can now choose from 4 different machines. The standard that you're used to, the one-shot kind of thing. Werp, which is kind of a rough version of a warp. Repitch, which repitches in time. And the one that people have been waiting for a long time, I think, slice mode. And not to forget, it's like a little present, sample rate reduction. So I'm going to show you the new functionality, of course. And if you want to dive really deep into the Digitakt, I have a 3-part, 8+ hour Digitakt course, which I just updated with extra bonus material focusing on this specific new set of features. So head over to davemech.live/shop to check out the courses that I have there and enjoy. Now let's check out the new functionality. Okay, so the new functions, man. There's a lot to tell. First, before we get to the machines, the really good stuff, let's first do something interesting because we now have a method of recording a specific length. First, let's go to the sampler, and here now we have a extra option where we can set the amount of steps to record. So if we combine it with the threshold, and let's set the recording source domain plus L plus R. When the audio goes over the threshold, we'll start recording. It stops recording at exactly 16 steps, which will create a perfect loop at this tempo, 138. This is our loop. So I'm gonna 16 steps. We're gonna keep it fairly short. So I'm gonna play. There we go. So this is our loop. Perfect loop, right? Here we have an extra little function. If we press left, it will now loop when we preview. So we get a sense of how this loops. So let's go to an empty pattern right here. There we go. This is the first functionality, right? So we can record exact loops. Another thing before we get into the machines is the sample rate reduction. So now we have both bit reduction and sample rate reduction, which is wonderful. I mean, it just gets better and better, right? The Digitakt, it's really cool. And we have an option to set the sample rate reduction pre and post filter. So if we add, let's gonna add a trigger in the sequencer, and I'm gonna set the length to 16 so it starts looping. Let's play this. There we go, done. But let's so pre-filter, it gets filtered with. Filters away the sample rate reduction stuff, but when I set a post filter, which is pretty cool effect. Pretty cool. Yep. So, and it's both filters, so it's really after the multi-mode filter and the base width filter, so that's good to know. This is really nice and welcome addition, and I'm gonna definitely use it a lot, using LFOs to maybe add some extra spice on top. Use a ramp LFO to kind of at the very end to create some sample rate reduction tail on longer samples, for instance. This is a very wonderful feature to be had and to be added to the Digitakt. Let's move on to the machine. So if I press func plus assign for the source, so this used to be to assign a sample to a track from the sample the sample browser, but I always found it a little bit useless. I never used it ever, but now they repurposed this to assign a machine, which is pretty cool. I wonder if that was always kind of in the planning to add more machines to the Digitakt. It almost seems like that is the case. Anyway, let's start with Werp and let's play this loop. You can already hear it being choppy. Werp time stretches a loop across 1, 2, 4, or 8 bars. And it chops it up into little segments, which you can choose here, either 8th, 16th, or 32nd segments. And then for each little segment, you can choose if it plays forward, backward, or reverse loop, or forward loop, which is very cool in combination with the play mode, because if I set this to reverse, it will start playing backward. But then if I set the forward to forward loop, get this sort of thing. So for instance, if I set it to 1 bar, which is kind of the normal, right? Or normal loop, let's play it. But then set the play mode, segment mode to reverse loop, or forward loop actually, and then the play mode to reverse. It just becomes a different, still, it's a bit clicky, so that's kind of the thing. It's a very rough Warp version, that's why they call it Werp. Because it's not as good as Warp from Ableton or something. It's very rough and clicky and glitchy, which is, I think, pretty cool, and you can use that to your advantage. But now it plays all these little segments forward, but it's playing backwards. So you get this weird. Actually pretty cool. So we can also change the tune, and it will still play. This is also pretty cool. It will still be in time, right? So it's always in time. Maybe 2 bars, and now it becomes really slow. Or 4 bars. Can do this sort of thing. It's very, very nice glitchy. So 8, now it becomes really. But also at 4 and then shorter segments. 8 bars. Okay, so I think that's really cool. Of course, you can modulate everything. So let's use LFO1, for instance, and modulate the tune. Everything will still be in time. Right? Play mode, bit reduction. So maybe size, segment mode. You can modulate all these things. Good thing to know, of course, that some of these functions only have a few values. So with only a few options, make sure that the depth of the LFO is fairly low. But yeah, I thought the tune for Werp is pretty cool. That's awesome. Cool. So that is Werp. Let's go and try Repitch. Repitch is also really, really cool, I think. A little bit less so to modulate the parameters. I'm still kind of exploring that a little bit, but the way it repitches is pretty cool. So what it does, it's kind of like Werp, but instead of chopping it up in segments, it just repitches automatically to keep things locked to the project's BPM. So you can really stretch this like Werp to 2, 4, or 8 bars, but instead of chopping it up and stuttering kind of thing, it down pitches it to stretch it and keeps it in time. So let's set the play mode to forward. Let's add some overdrive. So if I set the bars to 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I really like this stuff. I like down pitching stuff, and if it now it stays in time. So yeah, I mean, recording stuff outside, like moving stuff, then loading that into the Digitakt, resampling it to a specific length, then using Repitch to downpitch it in a rhythmic way. Man, that's just, for me, that's a perfect workflow. It's super quick. Of course, we can also set this to 1 bar, change the length, and whatever I do, it will stretch the new length of this sample out over 1 bar. So this can result in very strange little rhythms and stuff. So to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually, on track 2, I'm going to load a kick. Now I'm going to repitch. I'm going to change the length. So this is pretty wacky, but the length is 120. So if we kind of chop this up in sort of logical whole numbers, or maybe 90. So this is, for instance, that's pretty cool, right? Well, we can try 60. That's just half, right? So, and then this sort of thing, right? Completely changes the vibe, the rhythm. Let's try 30. Also cool. Now let's play with the starting point. The length is 30, but I can set this to see? You can really experiment a little bit. Cool. Let's change the pitch a little bit of this kick. Well, there you go. That's kind of Repitch in a nutshell. Last but not least, let's change to slice. So slice kind of speaks for itself. Slice mode slices the sample up into segments. And now it's set to a grid of 4. You can set it to 8, 16, 32, or 64. And it's a fixed grid. You cannot change the individual slices. It's also a very rough version of slice mode, but it does really work well. And so you can see that I'm playing now 1 slice. The interesting thing is that you can set the length. So if I want to just have 1 trigger play them all, 1. So now it will play all 4 slices because the length is set to 4. Then we have slice select. And if you set it to note, this means that if I go to chromatic mode, it will play the different slices, and it will just kind of repeat it over the whole keyboard. And when I set the grid higher, then of course we get more slices like that. We can also specifically choose like slice 1, and now I can repitch that specific slice and play it on the keyboard. So if you have a melodic loop, for instance, you can kind of repitch it per slice, which is pretty cool. If we have a grid of, let's create a grid of 16, and let's make it a bit simpler. Let's create a grid of 8, but you can see it's now repeating like a machine gun, and we can actually, of course, manually lock the slice number to each of these steps, or we could automate this by pressing yes in the source screen. And here we have the option between create linear locks and create random locks. So if I choose linear locks, it will distribute the 8 slices across the trigs that I've put into the sequencer. That's quite important. So make sure that you have some trigs in the sequencer, and it will just linearly from 1 to 8 in this case distribute it. And you can see it. There's parameter locks right now, and you can see that it has locked this slice number. So now we place it in double tempo because it's a 1-bar loop with 8 slices across 8 16ths. And of course, what we can also do, and this is where it gets a little bit more fun, I think, is let's change it back to 16 steps, is kind of randomly distribute the slices. So if we input some, make sure that everything, something like this, and now press yes and choose create random locks, we get something like this. And of course we can keep changing this until we find something interesting, etc. So now it has locked slices randomly across these triggers. Maybe change the tuning. So you can create whole new rhythms from those slices, and it is really like very effective in things like hip hop, of course, which it really is awesome for this kind of stuff. But it also works for techno. A little bit of delay. Now maybe start use LFO on tune, for instance, and maybe square wave. Or, you know, let's go through the modes. And sample slot. It's also interesting because now it will change the samples, obviously, while still having the same grid, same locks applied. This one is a bit funky, so let's change this a bit. Pretty cool, right? Reverse mode. And the loop mode is also interesting. So you can see, you can take this pretty far. And and as you also can see that this takes Digitakt to a completely new level, I think. For me, there was never really a ceiling with Digitakt. I always found new ways to kind of create new interesting stuff, and definitely because when you start working with your own samples and stuff, there's always some new kind of weird structure that you've never come across before. But this is just, it has hired the ceiling that was never there, if that makes sense. Don't think it does, but who cares? You know what I mean, I think. So, enjoy the new functionality of your Digitakt. And if you don't have Digitakt yet, I'm sure this will maybe have pushed you over the edge and to get one. And then I wish you all the joy and fun with the new functionality and this very complete sampler that it is right now. It's quite amazing. 6 years ago it was released. It's 4 times the machine it was when it was released. So, yeah, pretty cool. So I really hope you enjoyed this overview. And if you want to really dive into the Digitakt into depth, head over to davemech.live/shop and check out my courses, which now have the added bonus material. Enjoy, and until next time.